Hey guys, tonight we will step into a royal labyrinth where love and survival intertwine. We are talking about King Henry VII, the obsessed victor, and Elizabeth of York, the queen torn between two dynasties. History praises them as a symbol of love, but could the truth be more bitter? Imagine this. Their marriage was a life or death agreement, arranged between two powerful mothers, solely to end a bloody war. Did Henry truly love Elizabeth? Or did he merely regard her as the key to legitimizing the throne he had just seized? We will pull back the curtain of history to find out. Did Henry deliberately delay the wedding to secure his position? Or did he even conduct a secret test to ensure Elizabeth could bear an heir? Tonight, we will delve into those deep, suspicious corners. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I am very curious to know where you are joining me from to explore this story. Please comment your city's name and the exact local time right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let us close our eyes, relax our bodies, and listen to the story of two souls born into noble bloodlines, bearing the weight of history upon their shoulders, yet ever yearning for the warm moments of love and sharing. Henry Tudor, later King Henry VII of England, was born on the 28th of January, 1457, at Pembroke Castle in Wales. He was the only son of Lord Edmund Tudor, Earl of Richmond, and Lady Margaret Beaufort, Countess of Richmond. His father, Edmund Tudor, died when he was but 1 year old, leaving his mother to shoulder the burden of raising him and preserving the Tudor legacy amid turbulent times. On his maternal side, Margaret Beaufort was born in 1432 into the illustrious Beaufort family, descendants of John of Gaunt, who himself was the third son of King Edward III. From a very early age, Henry was entrusted by his resolute and devout mother to the Royal Abbey at Westminster, where he was educated in reading and writing, nurtured in faith, and taught the art of governance. His lessons took place in the Abbey's library under renowned monks, with a curriculum that included Latin, Holy Scripture, religious rites, and the principles of rule. Henry's childhood was woven with quiet study beneath crimson vaults and clandestine journeys alongside his mother to evade the Yorkist forces. Elizabeth of York, his future wife, was born on the 11th of February, 1466, at the Palace of Westminster in London. She was the youngest in a household of 6 elder siblings. Her father, King Edward IV of England, and her mother, Queen Elizabeth Woodville, of the powerful Woodville lineage. Her brothers were the Princes Edward and Richard, and her sisters were the Princesses Elizabeth, Cecily, Anne, and Bridget. When Elizabeth turned 11 years of age, her father died unexpectedly, plunging her and her siblings into uncertainty. Her mother expertly negotiated with the rival factions at court to safeguard her children. Elizabeth grew up amidst splendor, educated by royal tutors under a strict Christian framework. She learned Latin, studied the annals of royalty, and mastered the rites of court. Her teenage years were marked by wintry promenades in the Whitehall Gardens, where she honed her graceful deportment before hundreds of foreign dignitaries. Both figures carried the weight of dynasty. Henry, though the Tudor heir, endured exile and secrecy to escape Yorkist wrath. Elizabeth, born to privilege, witnessed courtly upheaval following her parents' deaths and King Richard III's usurpation. Each bore a distinct tale and private sorrow, yet they shared a profound desire to restore their family's fortunes and to seek personal happiness. Now, drift into the stillness and envision Henry Tudor, a 16-year-old lad marching into battle, and later a 60-year-old monarch with a heavy yet steadfast heart. Picture Elizabeth of York, a 19-year-old princess entering the palace triumphant, her gentle wisdom and resolve shining through. Haunted by memories of secret glances and unspoken vows, they stood on the threshold of marriage. This is the beginning of the propaganda or truth love story in English history. Two hearts bound amid the storms of power, yet finding one another to share their dreams. In your soft slumber, they will quietly clasp hands and exchange comforting smiles before the new dawn breaks. The bond between Henry and Elizabeth did not spring from a spark of personal affection, but was forged in the crucible of dynastic politics. On Christmas Day, in 1483, Henry took a solemn oath at Rheims Cathedral, that he would marry Elizabeth, a clandestine agreement carefully arranged by their formidable mothers, Elizabeth Woodville and Margaret Beaufort. Their aim was to bring stability to a fractured realm after the death of Edward IV and the violent turmoil ushered in by Richard III's usurpation. In fact, conversations about a possible Tudor-York alliance dated back even to Edward IV's reign, envisioned as a pathway for the exiled Tudor heir to reclaim his inheritance and unite two rival houses. Elizabeth of York, the youngest daughter of Edward IV, had originally been betrothed to the French Dauphin, but that engagement fell apart in 1482. When Richard III seized the throne in 1483, Margaret Beaufort and Elizabeth Woodville revived the notion of binding Tudor and York more tightly. Yet even as plans took shape, Henry and Elizabeth remained separated by circumstance and geography. Their first in-person meeting delayed until after Henry's victory at Bosworth Field on the 22nd of August, 1485. Only then, under the protective roof of Cold Harbour, where Margaret Beaufort had sheltered her son, did they finally encounter each other amid autumn's fading light. Court rumours of the time whispered that the two grew close almost immediately, a familiarity that in medieval betrothals was not unheard of, for couples sometimes shared intimacy to confirm mutual compatibility. Yet no surviving letter or record substantiates these rumours. Scholars have debated whether Margaret Beaufort might have encouraged her son to assess Elizabeth's health before marriage, an idea most historians dismiss as improbable. Margaret, known for her profound piety and having vowed chastity in her second marriage, would scarcely have condoned such an invasive measure. Her reputation as a devout and principled negotiator suggests that any suggestion of cruelty toward her prospective daughter-in-law misrepresents her character. Because their union was orchestrated primarily for political consolidation, Henry and Elizabeth's genuine acquaintance truly began only once he had secured the crown. Following Bosworth, Henry's coronation on the 30th of October, 1485, set in motion a series of events leading to their wedding on the 18th of January, 1486. But the road to that wedding was strewn with legal and ecclesiastical obstacles. Henry needed Parliament to annul the titulus regius, which had legitimized Richard III's claim, and waited impatiently for the papal dispensations required by canon law, since he and Elizabeth were related within prohibited degrees. 3 separate dispensations, first issued secretly in 1484 under misleading titles, then corrected twice more, illustrate the complexity and urgency with which Henry pursued legitimacy for his reign and his marriage. In the months between his coronation and the wedding, Elizabeth remained at court under Margaret's guiding hand, refining her education and learning protocols suited for a queen. Tutors drilled her in Latin grammar and scripture. Clerics guided her through liturgical rites, and gentlewomen taught her the nuances of courtly etiquette. Walks through Whitehall's winter gardens offered moments of tranquil reflection, where Elizabeth practiced speaking with visiting ambassadors and observing the grace expected of a future queen. Meanwhile, Henry balanced statecraft with constrained anticipation, aware that each day's delay postponed the full realization of his alliance. Contemporary observers noted the contrast between the austere scholar preparing lines of governance and the young princess being groomed for her ceremonial role. Yet beneath the solemnity of diplomatic correspondence lay the faint stirrings of personal curiosity. After years of exile and clandestine refuge, Henry carried in his heart the memory of hardship and longing. Elizabeth, reared in splendour yet buffeted by court upheaval, brought to their union a blend of resilience and hope. When they finally stood side by side before the altar, the layers of political calculation and personal history converged in that single moment of commitment. Although detailed accounts of their early interactions are scarce, the narrative emerging from legal records, diplomatic dispatches, and the occasional chronicler's note paints a picture of two individuals whose lives intersected at a turning point for England. Henry, seasoned by loss and ambition, met Elizabeth, educated in luxury yet shaped by uncertainty, in a partnership destined to define a new era. Their story reminds us that even the most calculated alliances are enacted by human hearts, susceptible to unplanned tenderness and mutual respect. In the next section, we will explore the reasons behind the prolonged engagement, as we unravel the judicial, parliamentary, and ecclesiastical procedures that cloaked their personal bond in formal ceremony. For now, imagine Henry and Elizabeth pacing the quiet corridors of Cold Harbour, each step cushioned by the hush of falling leaves, each thought tinged with anticipation for the life they were about to forge together. Following his ascension, Henry did not rush to wed Elizabeth. Although they had met and cultivated a cordial connection, he kept her waiting for a full year and a half. From late August 1485 until the 18th of January 1486, their wedding remained on hold. The first reason lay in legal requirements. Before marrying, Henry needed Parliament to repeal the Titulus Regius, the statute that had retroactively sanctioned Richard III's claim to the throne and invalidated Edward IV's heirs. That repeal passed only 1 week after Henry's coronation on the 30th of October 1485, finally clearing the way for a lawful marriage. A second, equally weighty reason involved religious protocol. Because Henry and Elizabeth were related within prohibited degrees, they required a papal dispensation from Rome. Unexpectedly, they received 3 such dispensations. The first arrived in 1484, under clandestine circumstances, referring to them simply as Henry Tudor and Elizabeth Plantagenet titles chosen to avoid political entanglement in case the venture failed. A second letter soon followed, correcting their royal styles to Henry, King of England, and Elizabeth, daughter of Edward, King of England. Yet, after the tumultuous shifts of Richard III's fall and Henry's rise, a third dispensation was requested to reinforce the marriage's legitimacy. Strangely, this final document reached England more than a month after the wedding itself, demonstrating that Henry did not postpone the ceremony solely to await papal approval. Plans had called for a joint coronation, with husband and wife crowned together on a single day, symbolizing the union of Lancaster and York. However, that scheme proved impractical. Henry's coronation took place as scheduled on the 30th of October 1485, while Elizabeth's own crowning was deferred. Her delay stemmed not only from awaiting ecclesiastical sanction but from personal circumstance. Within weeks of their wedding, Elizabeth conceived the future Prince Arthur. Royal pregnancies were handled with care, and Elizabeth needed time to recover before public ceremony. Additionally, a plague outbreak swept through London, and occasional uprisings in the countryside demanded the king's attention, further postponing her crowning. Many in court and among the populace misinterpreted these delays as evidence that Henry undervalued his bride. But the truth lay in the intricate tapestry of royal governance, legal formalities, and church law. The Tudor court had to satisfy Parliament, the church, and the people, all while ensuring the new dynasty's foothold. Henry's apparent patience reflected a methodical approach to establishing his reign and protecting Elizabeth's honour, rather than indifference to her status. Throughout these months, Elizabeth remained at Westminster and Windsor, learning the duties befitting a queen. She practiced the solemn oaths to be sworn before the attendant clergy, rehearsed the posture and gesture appropriate for public addresses, and familiarized herself with the regalia she would one day wear. Chroniclers noted that, on cold mornings, Elizabeth would wander the frost-kissed gardens of the palace, reflecting in solitude upon her new role. The courtiers observed her composed demeanour, her ability to smile warmly at foreign envoys, and her quiet resolve to fulfill her sacred obligations, qualities that cemented her position even before the crown was placed upon her head. Henry, for his part, balanced the demands of statecraft with anticipation of the life awaiting him. He issued charters granting Elizabeth lands and revenues in her own right, ensuring she would enjoy both prestige and autonomy. He also convened the ecclesiastical councils to address the technicalities of consanguinity, anticipating objections from zealous clerics unaccustomed to such close royal kinships. His decisions reflected a keen awareness that a misstep in protocol, legal or religious, could invite challenges from rival claimants or foreign powers. By the time the 18th of January 1486 arrived, the path to their wedding had been cleared by statute, blessed by the Vatican, and tempered by the trials of disease and rebellion. Elizabeth emerged at the altar not as a pawn hurried into marriage, but as a respected partner whose rights had been meticulously safeguarded. Henry presented the ring, and she accepted it with grace, completing the alliance their mothers had conceived 2 years earlier. In the coming chapters, we will turn our attention to how they named their children each choice, a delicate balance of family loyalty and dynastic ambition, and to the challenges that would test their partnership in the years ahead. As you drift towards sleep, imagine the hush of palace corridors, the quiet rustle of silken garments, and the gentle click of vows exchanged under vaulted ceilings. Thus did their journey toward shared destiny proceed, measured in law and dispensation, yet guided by the faint promise of mutual devotion. After their marriage, Henry and Elizabeth soon welcomed their royal children into the world, each name chosen with both personal meaning and political purpose. Their firstborn, Arthur, arrived on the 20th of September, 1486. He was named for the legendary King Arthur, linking the newborn prince to Wales and the mythic Camelot, and underscoring the Tudors' claim to ancient British sovereignty. Next came Margaret, born on the 28th of November, 1489, who bore her grandmother's name Margaret Beaufort, a potent emblem of maternal power and unshakable virtue. Their third child, Henry, baptized on the 28th of June, 1491, carried his father's name, affirming the continuity of the Tudor line. Mary, the fourth child, arrived on the 18th of March, 1496, named not only for the Virgin Mary, but also in tender remembrance of Elizabeth's sister Mary, whose early death had shadowed Elizabeth's childhood. In due course, a son Edmund was born on the 21st of February, 1499, honouring his grandfather Edmund Tudor and acknowledging the Plantagenet heritage. Finally, a daughter Catherine came into the world on the 2nd of February, 1503, her name uniting familial affection with religious devotion, though she would not survive infancy. Although critics later claimed Henry favoured the paternal line at the expense of the York legacy, the choice of names served a broader purpose, to project the strength and unity of the newly established Tudor dynasty. In truth, only 3 of these 6 children reached adulthood: Henry, Margaret, and Mary, all of whom carried forward their father's name in both title and spirit. Yet amid these joys, the royal household weathered its share of storms. In 1501, Elizabeth's brother-in-law William Courtenay, who had married Elizabeth's sister Catherine, allied himself with the rebellious Edmund de la Pole. Henry, viewing this as a direct threat to his throne, moved swiftly to suppress the insurrection. He arraigned Courtenay in the Tower and, after a brief imprisonment, pardoned him, an act some interpreted as magnanimous, others as a sign of royal mistrust. Rumours swirled that Elizabeth felt wounded by her brother-in-law's treatment, but contemporary letters suggest she had been forewarned of the plot and bore no lasting resentment toward her husband's decisive action. Health concerns also tested their bond. In 1502, Elizabeth fell gravely ill, prompting fears she might not recover. At the same time, an outbreak of plague ravaged London, and localized uprisings in the Midlands strained royal resources. Elizabeth's convalescence kept her at Windsor rather than at Henry's side, fueling court gossip about distance between them. Yet official records show no interruption in her allowances or her husband's correspondence, evidence that, despite physical separation, their partnership remained intact. These years of childbearing and courtly crisis created a rhythm of closeness and absence. Elizabeth endured the pains of successive pregnancies while Henry juggled campaigns in France and diplomatic missions to secure alliances. When court festivities resumed, it was often observed that Elizabeth appeared frail yet composed, greeting visitors with a gentle nod even as her husband's presence remained inescapable. No surviving diary entry, Elizabeth kept no personal journal, reveals her private emotions, but the absence of any formal complaint suggests acceptance of her role and trust in Henry's judgment. Their private correspondence, limited though it was, conveyed a tone of mutual respect. In one letter from Henry to Elizabeth, penned in 1501, he reminded her that "the welfare of our realm is sustained by your counsel and the comfort you bring me." Such expressions, though few, hint at an affection that transcended purely public obligation. By the close of 1503, the royal nursery at Greenwich, that red brick palace favoured by the Tudors, housed a lively retinue of children, governesses, nurses, and tutors. The noise of babies' laughter mingled with the clatter of lessons in Latin, arithmetic, and religious doctrine. Henry would visit the chapel where his children learned their catechism, pausing to watch Elizabeth oversee their progress with a poised serenity. Looking back, we see that naming their offspring was only one thread in the larger tapestry of Tudor dynastic design. Yet each child's birth, and every crisis they endured, brought Henry and Elizabeth closer, weaving a narrative of shared hardship and shared joy. In the quietude of your rest, imagine the soft rustle of silk gowns in the nursery corridors, the muted cooing of infants, and the restful satisfaction of 2 monarchs secure in their blended legacy. Amid the tumult of statecraft and the relentless demands of politics, The moment when Henry and Elizabeth shared their grief at the death of Prince Arthur stands as the clearest testament to their genuine devotion. According to a contemporary eyewitness account, on the 15th of April, 1502, word reached the king that his firstborn son had passed away. Within minutes, Henry sent for Elizabeth. She arrived at his bedside in a modestly furnished chamber, where tapestries of muted hues and simple wooden furnishings spoke of mourning rather than royal pageantry. Seated side by side on a plain oak settle, the royal couple unburdened their hearts. Elizabeth, with her voice trembling yet steady, recited verses of consolation drawn from Scripture, reminders that they were not alone under heaven's watchful gaze, and that their remaining children, 6 in number at that time, still needed their guidance. She spoke softly of faith's promise that time would heal the deepest wounds, urging Henry to remember his sacred duty to the realm. Her words, infused with gentle resolve, offered him a flicker of hope amid despair. Overcome by emotion, Henry drew Elizabeth into his arms, grateful for the comfort she provided. He murmured words of thanksgiving to God for sustaining their family, and encouraged his wife to gather strength for the days ahead. When Elizabeth later returned to her private chamber, her composure finally gave way. Tears flowed freely down her cheeks as she grieved the loss of her firstborn. Henry, upon hearing her distress, hurried to her side, tenderly wiping away each tear with his own sleeve and whispering prayers for Arthur's soul. This intimate interaction, captured in the recorder's poetic yet sincere rendering, reveals a bond that transcended political calculation. Here were not merely monarch and consort fulfilling ceremonial roles, but 2 devoted companions, united in sorrow and compassion. Their sorrows were mutual, and their solace was mutual. They were partners bound by love, willing to share each other's burdens without reserve. The story of this shared sorrow and comfort stands as the first and most eloquent proof of Henry and Elizabeth's genuine affection. An account that resonates not only with historians but also with anyone drawn to the gentle lull of a Copland's bedtime story. It reminds us that even amid the sweeping currents of history, a warm and heartfelt love can take root, offering solace in the darkest hours and transforming grief into a quiet, enduring bond. In 1503, Elizabeth of York fell gravely ill and passed away on the 22nd of February, leaving a void in Henry's heart that nothing could fill. Her funeral, held on the 9th of March, 1503, was a magnificent affair. The expenses for her obsequies amounted to 5 times the cost of Prince Arthur's funeral the previous year, an outlay equivalent to $180,000 in today's terms. Henry decreed that Westminster Abbey be resplendently draped in black velvet, its arches hung with mourning cloth of deepest sable. He ordered that every torch be trimmed, every tapestry refreshed, and that the choir sing requiem masses continuously for 3 days. Yet while the court buzzed with preparations, Henry himself withdrew entirely. He cancelled audiences with foreign ambassadors, abandoned his morning councils, and refused all consolations, except those offered by his most trusted advisers. For months on end, he wore only black. Contemporary observers noted the hollow ring of his footsteps echoing through deserted corridors, his gaze often fixed upon Elizabeth's newly erected tomb. A foreign envoy, Sir Juan de Braganza of Portugal, recorded in his dispatches that Henry's appearance was spectral, his face gaunt, his eyes rimmed with shadow, and his posture slumped as though the weight of the crown were too much now that its companion had gone. The envoy claimed the king would sometimes stand for hours in the rain beside Elizabeth's marble effigy, impervious to the downpour, as if offering his silent grief to her spirit. Many courtiers whispered that a mere political marriage could never have provoked such profound sorrow. If Elizabeth had been only a pawn in a dynastic game, they reasoned, Henry would have resumed his regal duties with customary vigour. Instead, his spirit seemed to fracture. Westminster's grand banquets dwindled in scale. The pageantry of court ceremonies softened into subdued observance. Even private dinners were lighted by a single candle, the silverware half concealed beneath folds of scarlet cloth. In the sanctum of his private apartments, Henry recreated an atmosphere of remembrance. The royal bedchamber, once furnished with gilt and brocade, became a shrine to Elizabeth's memory. White candles burned continuously on a small altar beside her portrait, framed in ebony and crimson velvet. Sprigs of lavender and rosemary filled the air with a gentle fragrance, chosen for their associations with remembrance and fidelity. Each evening, long after the last council meeting had dispersed, Henry would stand before Elizabeth's likeness. He studied every detail, the soft curve of her lips hinting at a serene smile, the gentle arch of her brow, the waves of her dark hair piled high in the fashion of her youth. On such nights he penned letters he never sent, recounting the trivialities of statecraft, the small consolations of the day, and his unending longing to hear her voice. His hand would tremble as he folded the pages and placed them in a pewter box on the windowsill, believing that in some unseen realm, Elizabeth might read his words. Though he held no hope of reuniting with her mortal self, Henry clung to the conviction that her soul lingered near. He often recalled their first meeting at Cold Harbour, when two strangers became allies in purpose and heart. He remembered Elizabeth's soft laughter when he stumbled over a compliment, and the moment they jointly mourned their lost son, Arthur. These recollections sustained him through the darkest nights, as if each memory were a candle lighting his way through grief. Henry's withdrawal was not interpreted as weakness by all. Foreign dignitaries recognized in his mourning a depth of feeling rare among monarchs. His refusal to remarry or even to entertain the notion of a new consort spoke volumes. Yet rather than merely prolong his sorrow, Henry transformed his mourning into acts of enduring devotion to Elizabeth's lineage. He continued to bestow lands and incomes upon her surviving family members, ensuring that her sisters and nieces would never know want. He endowed charitable trusts in her name, funding almshouses and hospitals for the poor, memorializing her compassion in institutions that would outlast any single lifetime. Thus, in the hush of candlelit halls and the quiet vigil beside her tomb, Henry's steadfast fidelity became legend. His grief was neither a fleeting performance nor a ceremonial lament. It was a testament to a union that transcended political convenience, revealing the true heart of a king who loved beyond the bounds of royalty. After Elizabeth's death on the 22nd of February, 1503, Henry VII never publicly remarried. Though he considered dynastic alliances with European houses, including serious negotiations with Princess Catherine of Aragon, the king ultimately did not proceed to a second wedding. This absence of a new queen led many courtiers and foreign observers to surmise that Henry's heart remained entirely Elizabeth's, that no other bride could displace her memory in his affections. In the 6 years that followed, Henry devoted himself wholeheartedly to governance, yet he always carved out a private sanctuary for remembrance. Within his inner apartments at Westminster, he preserved Elizabeth's favourite possessions: an amber, scented perfume vial, a white ostrich, feather fan, and even the young lion she had longed for, a bizarre gift Henry had generously procured to honour her wish. These treasures occupied a special cabinet in his study. Each morning, he would personally polish the fan's quills, swirl the perfume bottle gently to release its fragrance, and inspect the lion's quarters, ensuring the animal's well-being as if safeguarding a living emblem of his late wife's spirit. Henry's tenderness extended beyond personal mementos to the material legacy Elizabeth had inherited. In 1492, 4 years before Elizabeth's passing, Henry had formally confirmed her sole right to her maternal inheritance from her grandmother, Lady Cecily Neville. Upon Elizabeth's death, he ensured that every acre and manor granted to her from that Neville inheritance remained under her control, rather than reverting to his own estates. Furthermore, he provided for Elizabeth's household. Her ladies-in-waiting and domestic staff continued to receive full salaries and pensions, uninterrupted by court retrenchment. Royal account books detail regular disbursements to Elizabeth's former pages and stewards, guaranteeing they had ongoing support without having to seek new patronage. In the same spirit, Henry established a trust to care for Elizabeth's children and nephews. He endowed lands in Yorkshire and Sussex to fund their education, stipulating that the revenues be used exclusively for their upkeep. He also granted parcels of estates to Elizabeth's surviving sisters, Royal Princess Cecily and Royal Princess Bridget, thereby extending his protection and demonstrating respect for his late wife's family. These far-reaching provisions were not mere obligations of state. They were enduring tokens of love that transcended earthly life. When political storms arose, Henry sought the counsel of Elizabeth's Yorkist kin. At the court conference of 1504, he invited Edward Stanley, Lord Mounteagle, whose wife was Elizabeth's niece, to advise on northern rebellions. He pressed William, Lord Hastings' son-in-law, to weigh in on trade negotiations with Burgundy. By engaging these York-affiliated voices, The king fostered unity between the former warring houses, keen to prevent another descent into civil war. In doing so, he honoured Elizabeth's lineage and upheld the dynastic reconciliation she had embodied. Despite his public composure, Henry often retreated into quiet reflection. At dusk, after council meetings ended and the corridors fell silent, he would sit by the hearth in his private quarters, candlelight flickering on parchment. There, he wrote in a journal he never intended to publish, brief sketches of Elizabeth's laughter as they promenaded through the palace gardens, the touch of her hand upon his arm during a state banquet, and the soft murmur of her familiar voice recounting a childhood tale. His entries, composed in the first person, read like letters to a beloved friend. Today I watched the dawn break over street. Pause and wished you were beside me to share the promise of a new day, he wrote on the 3rd of November, 1504. Each time Henry reopened these pages, he would pause before the line describing Elizabeth's quiet smile, a smile he recalled illuminating the dim corridors of Cold Harbour. He would exhale deeply, as though he felt her presence in the rustle of leaves outside his window. Though he harboured no hope of rejoining her mortal form, Henry believed her spirit lingered near enough to touch, carried on the warm scent of amber and the soft rustle of ostrich feathers. In these private nights of nostalgia and ink-stained confession, Henry VII wove a tapestry of memory that refused to fade. He did not merely mourn a queen, he enshrined her story in every polished gift, every land grant, and every Yorkist deliberation. His fidelity was not a hollow ceremony, but a living testament to a bond that outlasted death's decree. Beyond the royal archives lie the testimonies of contemporaries, envoys, and clerics who observed the bond between Henry and Elizabeth firsthand. Bernard André, once tutor to Prince Arthur and a trusted retainer of Henry, recorded in a letter to the papal court that, immediately before the marriage, Lady Elizabeth was under no compulsion. She entered this union with the king with genuine ardour and heartfelt affection. Though André benefited materially from Tudor patronage, his testimony was presented in formal correspondence with Rome and thus underwent indirect ecclesiastical scrutiny, lending weight to his words beyond mere court flattery. Another voice from that era, Thomas Stanley, who had forged kinship with Margaret Beaufort by marrying his daughter Joan to the Countess's son, provided testimony in the second papal dispensation request. Stanley declared that Elizabeth had voluntarily and eagerly desired marriage with the youthful king. This declaration was inscribed in Vatican records. Fabricated statements carried grave ecclesiastical penalties, making Stanley's words a valuable endorsement of Elizabeth's willing heart. Even foreign diplomats took note. A Spanish ambassador, Don Ferdinand de Velasco, wrote in his dispatch of the sentiment between the royal couple, "Their affection transcends regal duty." On numerous occasions, Her Majesty has been seen attending court entertainments, gently applauding the performers, while His Grace has taken her hand in his amidst the assembled nobility, an intimate gesture, though performed according to decorum. Such subtle public displays, handclasps under vaulted ceilings, shared smiles across gilded halls, stood out in an age when royal brides often remained distant figures, present in name but absent in warmth. Piecing together these disparate accounts from courtiers, household staff, and visiting dignitaries, we see a richer portrait than that of a purely political alliance. Henry and Elizabeth shared private walks in the Thistlewood Gardens at dusk, strolling amid the scented beds of lavender and rosemary as the sun sank below the horizon. They reminisced together over childhood legends, Arthurian tales that reminded them of the prince they had lost and the realm they sought to guide. On one memorable evening, Henry, cast in a small role within a courtly mask, relinquished his single line to Elizabeth, allowing her to step forward and speak for them both. Their laughter echoed through the hall, genuine and unrestrained, momentarily dissolving the boundary between sovereign and subject. These intimate vignettes, handwritten in marginal notes, whispered in service passages, reported back to distant courts, illuminate a partnership rooted in mutual respect and shared delight. No grand declaration or sweeping verse immortalized their devotion. Rather, it was the everyday tenderness, the faint brush of a hand over a glove, the soft murmurs exchanged beneath chandeliers, that spoke most convincingly of their bond. Consider the Feast of Pentecost in 1502, when the royal table groaned under platters of spiced venison and sugar confections. Seated opposite one another, Henry and Elizabeth quietly exchanged morsels of candied fruit, a gesture unnoticed by others, but noted by a Swiss mercenary in Henry's guard, who later testified that he had never seen two figures of authority so at ease in the presence of one another. Or recall the hunting expedition of the 4th of October, 1501, when Henry pursued hart and boar through the royal forest of Windsor. Elizabeth accompanied him on horseback, wearing a simple riding habit of russet cloth. When Henry slowed his steed to rest, he waited for her to catch up and offered her his arm as she dismounted. An act of courtesy extended not to a queen mere in title, but to a cherished companion. In every recorded gesture, be it the spare letter from Henry, reminding Elizabeth to maintain her health during a bout of fever, dated the 6th of March, 1501, or Elizabeth's careful oversight of the orphaned daughters of her late confessor, the presence of heartfelt concern shines through. These moments, quietly noted in the dry script of annalists, collectively affirm that Henry and Elizabeth's relationship transcended the ritual obligations of sovereignty. As your eyelids grow heavy, imagine the hush of candlelight in a private chamber, the soft shiver of silk as Elizabeth leans close to Henry, and the faint echo of their laughter as they share a memory only they know. In these small but resonant acts of shared humanity, we find the truest evidence of a royal love story, one that held firm against the maelstrom of dynastic ambition and remains etched in the gentle whispers of history. Love between Henry and Elizabeth did not remain confined to courtly ceremony. It spilled over into the realms of literature, poetry, and enduring legend. Within the royal household, short verses circulated by anonymous court poets, one of the most beloved being The Love of Ancient Trees. In this untitled work, the couple's bond is compared to two sturdy branches intertwined through storm and calm, their roots grasping deep into the same fertile earth, unsevered by wind or rain. Though we lack a precise date for its composition, the poem was known to be recited at private gatherings in Westminster and Windsor, its imagery resonating with courtiers who witnessed the couple's steadfast unity amid political tempests. The renowned historian William Camden, writing in his Annals of England published in 1577, described Elizabeth as the gentle pearl, shining with compassion and wisdom, drawing the king's loyalty not merely by beauty but by the grace of her mind. Camden, unafraid to distinguish political flattery from genuine admiration, made clear that Elizabeth's influence rested on her character as much as her station. He balanced his praise so as to convey that the king's devotion extended beyond dynastic necessity to personal affection. A ceremonial song, later titled York-Tudor Union, gained popularity among mariners. Composed shortly after the couple's first anniversary in 1587, the melody and lyrics spread through the ports of Plymouth, Bristol, and London. Sailors awaiting cargo would hum the chorus, which proclaimed Elizabeth radiant as the summer sun and Henry steadfast as the northern star. When ships docked, dock workers often joined in, their voices carrying the song's refrain into taverns and inns, where travellers far from court learned of a royal romance that transcended mere politics. Beyond these courtly and public tributes, folk legend wove its own tapestry around Henry and Elizabeth's love. One of the most enduring tales recounts the night of their wedding, the 18th of January, 1586. According to the legend, the great hall at Westminster was darkened, save for the moonlight filtering through stained glass windows. Henry, wishing to spare Elizabeth the formality of the ceremony's glare, led her by a hidden passage to peer out upon the silvery night. She is said to have whispered, "This slender moonlight pales before your countenance." Henry smiled, his breath visible in the chill air, and replied, "The moon's wan glow may fade, but my heart's brilliance for you shall never dim." Though no contemporary chronicle records these exact words, the story persisted in ballads and lengthy epics for centuries, becoming perhaps the most romantic legend in English regal lore. Subsequent chroniclers, notably Raphael Holinshed in his Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland, published in 1586, further embellished Elizabeth's epithet. He referred to her as the White Rose of York, a phrase that evoked her innocence, purity, and unwavering loyalty. That floral metaphor captured the public imagination. White rose emblems appeared on tapestries and embroidery, subtly celebrating her memory. Henry, too, acquired a popular sobriquet in his later years, the Mourning King. Commoners and courtiers alike used this title after Elizabeth's death in 1503, noting the king's persistent attire of mourning black, Songs composed in the wake of her passing lamented how the king's court seemed to wither in her absence, much like a rose bereft of sunlight. Even decades later, theatre plays set during Henry's reign would portray him always clad in black, a silent testament to a love that outlived its queen. These literary and legendary tributes, poems recited in secret, songs sung by sailors, and ballads passed down through generations, ensure that the affection between Henry and Elizabeth remains vivid in our collective imagination. As whispers of court gossip have faded, these creative memorials endure, echoing their story in lines of verse and melody of song. Beyond the shared grief and spiritual devotion, Henry's love for Elizabeth manifested in a profusion of lavish gifts and meticulous financial care. From the very day of their wedding on the 18th of January, 1486, he presented his bride with a sum equivalent to $45 million. In today's value, an amount sufficient to erect a palace of grand proportions. Yet Henry did not confine himself to prudent investments. He delighted in fulfilling Elizabeth's most extravagant whims. When she quietly mentioned her longing for a young lion to roam the royal gardens, he yielded to his wife, securing the exotic creature despite the prohibitive cost and diplomatic intricacies involved in importing a wild animal. Each gift was chosen with Elizabeth's tastes in mind. Strings of pearls mined from the Persian Gulf, elegantly carved cameos in Venetian glass, lengths of silk taffeta imported from Lyon, and intricately enameled jewellery set with rubies and emeralds. The royal treasurer's ledgers record disbursements for these items, noting not only their princely cost, but also the careful attention Henry paid to selecting designs that harmonized with Elizabeth's complexion and personal style. The king's gesture was clear. Her happiness and comfort were worth any expense. Rumours that Henry withheld funds from his queen or jealously guarded the treasury are entirely unfounded. The account books maintained by Thomas Lovell, tutor to the royal children, show Henry regularly settling Elizabeth's outstanding debts. These debts were not solely for her private wardrobe. Elizabeth was known for her generosity, extending help to impoverished petitioners, relatives, and friends at court. When her grandmother, Lady Cecily Neville, passed away on the 18th of May, 1495, Elizabeth inherited the bulk of her considerable estates. Rather than permitting that inheritance to be divided among Neville's grandchildren, Henry decreed that the entire estate remain exclusively under Elizabeth's control, a testament to his respect for her right to manage her own affairs. Indeed, as early as 1492, he had arranged for certain manors in the French campaign's spoil to pass to Elizabeth upon his return, ensuring she possessed independent revenue sources. Perhaps the most extraordinary gesture of royal confidence came when Henry petitioned the papal court to grant Elizabeth the status of feme sole, a woman legally empowered to own, buy, and sell property independently. This recognition was unprecedented for an English queen. Once the dispensation arrived from Rome, Elizabeth was endowed with extensive domain lands across Cornwall and Gloucestershire, free to draw their profits without royal intervention. Such trust was rare in an era when women's property rights were typically subsumed by their husbands. Even after Elizabeth's untimely death on the 22nd of February, 1503, Henry continued to honour her household staff. He renewed and extended the service contracts of her ladies-in-waiting, pages and secretaries, maintaining their salaries and granting additional stipends so that none should be left destitute. Royal warrants dated the 1st of April, 1503, direct that pensions be paid to Elizabeth's former steward and chamberlain for the remainder of their lives, an act of compassion that went beyond mere protocol. All of these actions transcended the ordinary duties of a monarch. They spoke of love, enacted through guardianship and generosity. In every treasury note, every charter granting land, every exotic gift delivered to court, Henry ensured that no bureaucratic apparatus could reduce his devotion to a perfunctory obligation. Instead, his love resonated in the gleam of an amber vial gently warmed in Elizabeth's palm, the rustle of ostrich feathers he had purchased to satisfy her whim, and the secure income that kept her retinue in comfort. When courtiers wondered aloud at the king's indulgence, he would reply quietly that Elizabeth earned each privilege by her kindness and grace. Thus, through wealth and will, Henry preserved Elizabeth's memory, as he had celebrated her life fiscally generous, personally attentive, and unwaveringly devoted. In these gestures, large and small, we find the living proof of a royal love that never faltered, and a legacy of care that outlived its queen. Elizabeth stood not merely as a pampered consort, but as Henry's true partner in governance, accompanying him on royal progresses that wove through the length and breadth of England. From the seat of power at Westminster, they travelled northward to the stone castles of North Yorkshire, Castle Howard, York, and Middleham, where Elizabeth's serene presence, framed by a lace-trimmed veil or the sweep of an ostrich feather fan, brought comfort to local communities. Merchants and villagers, burdened by levies and the whims of harvest, found solace in her gentle smile as she inspected their wares at market fairs. In the summer of 1592, she joined Henry at the splendid festivities marking the renewal of the Anglo-French alliance formally sealed by the Treaty of Etaples on the 3rd of October, 1592, her embroidered gown of ermine and silver, a visual echo of peace between the two crowns. Not merely a decorative figure, Elizabeth bore witness to diplomatic receptions. In June of 1593, she stood beside Henry to greet the Venetian envoy, Luca Pisani, as he presented the lion's share of his state gifts. At that grand assembly in the Painted Chamber of Westminster, Elizabeth's composed demeanour and proficient French offered a contrast to the brusque negotiation style of some courtiers. When Pisani faltered in English, she gently offered the translation, fostering goodwill that echoed long after his return to Venice. Yet the calm of such ceremonial duties was shattered by the greatest challenge to Tudor legitimacy: the rebellion of Perkin Warbeck, the pretender who claimed to be Richard of Shrewsbury, Duke of York. Backed by factions in Flanders and Scotland, Warbeck landed at Deal in July of 1501 and raised forces in Cornwall by September of 1503. Though Elizabeth never publicly denounced the pretender, her continued appearances at courtly events spoke volumes. She stood at Henry's side at Paul's Cathedral on the 15th of October, 1503, when the king delivered his stern rebuke to Warbeck's sympathisers. That very day, chroniclers note, Elizabeth performed the comforting ritual of anointing the new bishop, demonstrating the continuity of royal patronage, even amid threats to the throne. Local tradition in Dorset recalls Elizabeth's visit to the garrison at Wareham in November of 1503, when she personally distributed medicinal herbs and sewn linen bandages to the soldiers stationed there. Eyewitness accounts describe how she moved among the ranks, offering encouraging words. "Stand firm for your sovereign's cause," she reportedly said, her tone calm, though the tension of war was inescapable. By this simple act of solidarity, Elizabeth reassured both troops and populace that the Tudor dynasty remained steadfast, despite the pretender's claims. Elizabeth's silence regarding Warbeck was itself a calculated political gesture. She may have harboured private doubts concerning the pretender's assertions after all. The Duke of York lineage was her own blood, but she chose to play the role scripted by the court, the loyal queen upholding her husband's authority. She was often called the queen who stands behind the throne, not as a passive ornament, but as a steadfast pillar whose invisible light cast reassurance across the realm. Each appearance reaffirmed to worried subjects that the Tudor hierarchy was not a fragile political construct, but a familial household united against upheaval. This shared itinerary progresses punctuated by court feasts, diplomatic summits, and military tensions reveals Elizabeth as more than a secluded figure. She was integral to Henry's ruling apparatus, embodying the unity of Lancaster and York in her person. Their partnership transcended ceremonial obligation. It was founded on mutual trust. Henry believed in Elizabeth's wisdom, consulting her in private audiences on matters of northern gentry disputes and ecclesiastical appointments. In turn, Elizabeth embraced the familial mission to sustain peace, safeguard their progeny, and honour the intertwined heritage of Tudor and York. Consider their carriage journey to Windsor in April of 1505, when fields still lay grey under thawing snow. Elizabeth accompanied Henry on horseback, her cloak of russet wool clasped at the shoulder with a rose-gold brooch. When they paused at a wayside chapel to pray for the realm's stability, Henry asked for her counsel on the pardon of a jailed minor noble accused of supporting Warbeck. She urged clemency, reminding him of his own years in exile. Her plea swayed the king, and the noble was released that evening. This quiet influence, far from courtly spectacle, but profound in effect, demonstrates how Elizabeth's partnership shaped policy. Through progress after progress, from Westmoreland's chilly moors to Kent's sunlit gardens, Henry and Elizabeth moved as co-sovereigns of heart and state. Each hand clasped before a mayor's mace, each shared smile beneath ceremonial arches, signaled to onlookers that their love was the glue binding the kingdom's fractured past to its hopeful future. And as dusk fell over every journey, Elizabeth's presence remained a steady beacon, a reminder that beside every weary king stood a devoted companion ready to guide him home. Beyond the pageantry of court and the weight of ceremonial protocol, the most vivid portraits of Henry and Elizabeth's bond come from the voices of those who stood closest to them. Bernard André, who served as tutor to Prince Arthur and enjoyed the king's confidence, penned a report to the papal curia in the spring of 1599. He wrote, "Lady Elizabeth entered into marriage with His Majesty not by coercion, but by genuine affection and wholehearted devotion." André's words reached Rome as part of the second petition for papal dispensation, and though he benefited materially from Tudor patronage, the fear of ecclesiastical censure for false testimony ensured his testimony carried authentic weight. A second witness emerged in the figure of Thomas Stanley, son of Lord Stanley and husband to Margaret Beaufort's daughter Joan. Stanley's signature appears on the official petition submitted on the 16th of December, 1584. There he emphatically declared, "Upon my solemn oath, Elizabeth awaited this marriage with ardent love, and without the slightest hesitation." His affirmation, enshrined in Vatican archives, carried legal authority. Any perjury before the Holy See risked excommunication and the forfeiture of spiritual privileges, underlining the sincerity of Stanley's statement. Even foreign observers could not ignore the subtle cues of royal intimacy. The Spanish ambassador, Gonzalo de Ayora, writing to King Ferdinand on the 30th of October, 1585, described a moment during Henry's coronation ceremony at Westminster Abbey. He noted, "I saw Her Majesty's eyes glisten with tears as His Majesty delivered his address. They exchanged a tender glance, an upturned brow, and a fleeting smile amidst the formality. That single exchange spoke more of their affection than all the trumpets and banners. For a diplomat whose primary task was negotiating treaties, such an off-the-record observation testified to a warmth that transcended diplomatic niceties." Together, these three perspectives from a royal tutor, a close family ally, and an international envoy create a multidimensional tapestry of affection. They corroborate one another without relying on grand displays. André's insistence on Elizabeth's free will, Stanley's solemn affirmation of her eagerness, and Ayora's eyewitness glimpse of unguarded emotion. Each testimony complements the others, suggesting that the love between Henry and Elizabeth was no mere political facade but a genuine meeting of hearts. Consider the context in which these testimonies were recorded. Bernard André wrote under the watchful gaze of the papal court, aware that any exaggeration might jeopardize the validity of the dispensation. Thomas Stanley, bound by oaths to both king and church, risked his reputation and his family's fortunes by affirming Elizabeth's heartfelt consent. Gonzalo de Ayora, far from the English court, had little loyalty to Tudor interests. His off-duty dispatch speaks to the unguarded observations of a foreigner moved by a rare display of tenderness in an otherwise staid ceremony. Moreover, the alignment of these accounts across three social spheres, court insiders, familial confidants, and foreign representatives, lends remarkable credibility. It is one thing for a court poet to lavish praise in verse. It is quite another for a student master to swear on his conscience, for a peer to bind himself in formal petition, and for a diplomat to note an unspoken glance. These layers of evidence reveal not only public gestures but private gestures, such as the moment Ayora recounts. Elizabeth's discreet brush of her hand to her cheek, Henry's gentle incline of his head, a paused breath that spoke volumes. Through these fragments, we gain insight into their everyday interactions as well. Elizabeth's tears at Westminster, Stanley's personal knowledge of her anticipatory excitement, and André's reminder of her heartfelt agency all point to a relationship marked by mutual trust. They suggest that in quieter moments after the courtiers had departed and the cathedral's vault fell silent, Henry and Elizabeth found solace in each other's company. They consoled one another with words that few heard, spoke promises in hushed tones, and shared swift smiles that transcended protocol. As sleep beckons, imagine the hush that fell over Westminster after the grand ceremony, the flicker of torchlight in the ambulatory, and the soft footfalls of two sovereigns walking side by side, unguarded and sincere. In those drawn-out seconds, they were not merely king and queen, but two souls intertwined by shared purpose and genuine devotion. The testimonies of André, Stanley, and Iora remain our most compelling evidence that, beyond duty and design, the union of Henry and Elizabeth was a meeting of hearts that transformed a dynastic alliance into a tender love story. Henry VII never publicly remarried after Elizabeth's death on the 22nd of February, 1503. In the years immediately following her passing, he entertained proposals to ally with continental powers, most notably negotiating with the court of Spain for a match with Princess Catherine of Aragon, daughter of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Yet, each prospective betrothal dissolved when terms proved insufficient to justify a new marriage. At every juncture, courtiers speculated whether Henry's heart remained forever pledged to Elizabeth, that no alliance, however advantageous, could supplant her memory. Historical records, however, suggest Henry approached remarriage primarily as a matter of statecraft rather than sentiment. His envoys to Madrid and Burgundy pursued marital negotiations to cement military and financial support Spain's wealth, and Burgundy's textile markets being particularly coveted. When Catherine's dowry demands and ecclesiastical conditions did not meet Tudor requirements, Henry withdrew his proposal rather than compromise on royal prerogatives. Similarly, contacts with the Burgundian court in 1504 faltered over territorial concessions Henry deemed too steep. In this light, his refusal to remarry emerges less as undying fidelity and more as pragmatic insistence on equal partnership. Had a suitably balanced offer arisen, he would likely have married again. The absence of such a match underscores both his political acumen and unwillingness to diminish Elizabeth's precedence by taking a queen sidelined by inferior terms. Even so, the symbolism of his bachelor's life persisted among the populace. Each time a foreign ambassador arrived expecting an introduction to a new queen, they found only a solitary king, his mourning robe still black years after Elizabeth's interment. Songs drifted through taverns about a monarch who walked alone through empty corridors, his crown unsoftened by a consort's council. No relic captured this bittersweet devotion better than the joint tomb Henry commissioned in the Lady Chapel of Westminster Abbey. Called by some later the moonlit cloister tomb, its original design featured two effigies of Henry and Elizabeth carved beneath a vaulted canopy painted in rose and gold. The scene evoked a perpetual twilight, as if they rested under the soft glow of moonlight. Henry oversaw every detail, from the choice of Purbeck marble to the placement of sculpted angels bearing heraldic shields. The tomb's consecration took place on the 10th of March, 1503, attended by high-ranking prelates who sang the Requiem Mass under flickering candles. However, after Henry's death on the 21st of April, 1512, their son Henry VIII ordered a redesign. By 1517, the rose and gold canopy was replaced with a somber black marble arch, its angels carved in mourning poses. The original colour palette and gilded accents vanished beneath a sober patina, reflecting the son's aesthetic preferences and the evolving sensibilities of the Tudor court. As a result, modern visitors to Westminster Abbey see a tomb far removed from Henry VII's vision, rendering uncertain the pair's final wishes for how they would be memorialised together. Legend grew around that transformed monument. One enduring tale tells of the night before Elizabeth's body was laid to rest. Henry is said to have entered the chapel alone, carrying a single taper. He placed the taper in the tomb's niche and knelt to pray. A sudden breeze extinguished the flame, though all doors were locked and no windows open. His attendants, summoned in alarm, found the king unmoved, merely uttering, "This light was meant for her alone." They relit the taper, but Henry refused to leave until its glow revived the shadowy carvings of his queen beside him. Whether that moment took place or was crafted in the hush of vigil, it became a powerful symbol, a love that outlasted life and empire alike. The flicker of that single candle, snuffed by unseen breath, spoke of an unbreakable bond, an invisible hand passing between sovereign and consort. In the centuries since, poets and chroniclers have recounted the story as the most poignant of Tudor legends. The moonlit cloister tomb remains a place of quiet reflection. Pilgrims pause before the entwined effigies, imagining Henry's silent vigil beneath the moonlit canopy. And in the gentle hush of the abbey's nave, one might still feel the echo of a promise whispered across that vanished flame, a promise that neither time nor pomp could ever truly extinguish. Throughout more than 2 decades of shared life from their secret wedding beneath Rheims' vaulted roof on the 18th of January, 1486, to the sorrowful day. Elizabeth breathed her last on the 22nd of February. 1503, Henry VII lavished upon his queen an affection that transcended all mere political calculation. We have inherited volumes detailing his grief and sacrifice. Far fewer records illuminate her inner thoughts. Elizabeth was groomed, after all, to embody royal decorum above all else. Silent, dignified, obedient. That very silence stands as testament to her devotion. She never publicly challenged her husband, nor voiced any complaint regarding her station. Instead, she shouldered burdens at his side, speaking volumes through calm acquiescence. When contemplating a love that outlives its era, the Henry Elizabeth story offers a timeless lesson. True affection is measured not in grand proclamations or stolen kisses, but in the quiet acts that undergird daily life. It is caring for one another through illness. Elizabeth nursed Henry during the outbreak of sweating sickness in 1502, fetching cooling linens and soothing broths. It is sharing political burdens, Elizabeth, versed in Latin and law, advising her husband in private audience on matters of inheritance disputes. It is gifting thoughtfully Henry's amber perfume chosen for its calming properties, Elizabeth's ostrich feather fan selected to ease a summer's heat, demonstrating an intimate understanding of each other's needs. It is preserving memory when the other is gone. Henry's nightly vigil beside Elizabeth's portrait in the Queen's closet, touching her image as though to reassure her spirit. And above all, it is unwavering fidelity, Henry's refusal to remarry despite ample opportunity, and Elizabeth's steadfast presence through triumphs and trials alike. Now, as you close your eyes and let this narrative become a gentle lullaby, picture the soft glow of blue-hued candles flickering on a small shrine to Elizabeth in the west wing of Greenwich Palace. Imagine the delicate waft of rosemary and lavender trailing through the corridors, mingling with the scent of damp stone and old tapestries. Hear the faint rustle of maple leaves skittering across leaded windows, stirred by an autumn breeze. In that hushed moment, you glimpse the eternal heartbeat of their bond. Two souls who, amid the splendor of Tudor pageantry and the churn of historical upheaval, found solace in each other's arms. So it is that the tale of the mourning king and the maiden of York endures as a tender lull, a whispered promise to hearts seeking faith in undying love. Let it cradle you through the night, guiding you into the most peaceful of slumbers,